growing up in the Philippines, in school before, it was not mentioned in our Philippine history books. No mention about the Filipino-American War. It was just like the time when it was the Spanish-American War, then the Spanish lost, and the Treaty of Paris, which we really didn't know about, but the America bought the Philippines from Spain for $20 million. And then came the Thomasides. So the Thomasides were the ship Thomas was brought to the Philippines to bring in the teachers, the educators, the pastors, the ministers, and this whole campaign. So there was a big black hole, a big gap in between. And for the longest time, you only had few materials on the subject. And John knew about this only 30 years ago. And he asked himself, why don't I know anything about this chapter in history? So that got him interested, that brought him to a lot of research, and then finally decided to do something about it, because this is part American history and at the same time part of Philippine history. But we were on the losing end of that history.
How did you personally react when you first found out that a Hollywood movie about the Philippine-American War was actually coming out?
Well, after hearing that, I thought it was pretty awesome, because not every day that you hear about the history, because when you look in the books, it's like only like one sentence of it. And it's just like, man, that's sad. Then weren't we here as well, like as much as everyone else was? So having to hear like what's gonna happen, and like the introduction and what's going on, of what they're gonna come out with, and give all history background about it, was pretty psyched about it. I was like, yes, that's gonna be great.
Great, thanks a lot.
I myself don't have a lot of knowledge on the Filipino-American War, just from what I hear from my parents, or just small facts. No one really told me about what really happened. So I'm actually quite excited to see this movie and to really learn about more of my culture and my background.
So yeah, how did you personally feel when it's like, whoa, they're making a film about the Philippine-American War?
My initial feeling was, finally they're gonna be able to showcase the story, and it's gonna, it has a mainstream media light on it too, with John Sayles writing and directing the film. So I think that it's a great avenue for us to share the story that has received like one paragraph in all the history books, from K through 12 education. So I mean, it's going to be nice to be able to sit in 2 hours of a movie about the Philippine-American War.
Well, when you say that one paragraph, if you don't mind, I'd like to add something. I mean, what was that one paragraph? Do you remember what that one paragraph was?
It was very quick transition from the Spanish to American War, or Spanish-American War to the American-Philippine War. It was just like a paragraph that detailed the 3-day Spanish-American War, and then how it led to the Philippine-American War. And that, I mean, it doesn't talk about any of the historical details of the Philippine-American War. So, I mean, how much can you really put in one paragraph, right? So, yeah.
The question is, like, how did you personally react when you found out that a movie was being made about the Philippine-American War?
My first reaction is about effing time. Because, I mean, come on, it's 2011. That happened, the late 19th century, early 20th century, and it took that long for a movie to come out. I think it's obviously the right time for it to come out.
How did you feel when you found out this movie was being made, or that it actually exists?
I think it's overdue. A movie like this about the Philippine-American War. I know I've done research on this particular period, and every time I talk to some Filipinos, they don't know anything about it. Americans don't know anything about it. It is not in the history books. It has been literally expunged from our history. And so I'm very happy that they are, and I hope that this is going to be a successful, release.
Not just like Filipino movies per se, like the love stories or it's nice to see right the Filipino, but the drama or the love and drama stuff. But it's nice to see something more educational or historical and factual, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you see all those other Filipino flicks
we
that are out
watch
here,
all the
and there's all
other
kind of Filipinos out here. But when it comes to history and education, it's just too bad our community doesn't support that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we do, so that's
we
that's
do.
the good thing.
Yeah.
Right on.
Thanks.
Well, thank you very much.
sure.
Thank you guys.
When I first found out, I was just hoping that it told the right story. I think I was a little bit scared that the story was going to be very much about, an American saving the Philippines. Just slightly, right? I mean, I don't know what's going to be, shown. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm really excited, that people are telling our story that hasn't been told. I mean, in our history books, it's not there. When you look up a Filipino in a history book, you see a paragraph. Right, and with all the students that we serve in San Francisco Unified, a paragraph that's so not right. So that's how I felt.
So the sentiment would be, there's a sense of betrayal. How come we don't know anything about this? And we were showing this to some students in schools in the Philippines. I said there was this really, strange question from one of the teachers when she asked John, "You mean America was not our savior?" So, that's a lot. And
A teacher actually
a teacher actually asked that. And if get into the details of it, it's quite shocking. I've learned about this about 15 years ago about the Battle of Bud Bagsak, but through one account when it said the Americans killed more Filipinos in a span of 3 years than the Spaniards did in a span of 300 years. That's quite a statistic.
One of the books that was shown in this preview, because there's another interview that's very good by Armina Van Leeuwen, it showed that McKinley, the president at the time, had a report on how the result of this colonization and this takeover of the Philippines was just going to annihilate and annihilated over 1 million people. So it's definitely information that some people may not even want to, or don't even know how to accept. So absolutely, I'm really excited.
I didn't learn anything about the Philippine-American War. It was like hidden from the history books, and the American history books. And when after my father died 6 years ago, I started to delve into the Filipino history, and I discovered the Philippine-American War, and it was quite an eye-opening experience for me. The amount of Filipinos that were killed and slaughtered during the Philippine-American War, and all the lies that the United States kind of led the Filipinos to believe that they're helping them to be independent, yet their real motive was to take control of the Philippines. And that's just like what the United States government has done with the Native American population. They made a lot of promises and then reneged on their deals because they really want control of the whole United States, quote, United States, which was basically stealing the Native American lands the same way the Americans did in the Philippines. They wanted to control the Filipinos through not just having American bases there, but through the educational system. When the Americans went to the Philippines, they used religion and education to, quote, brainwash the Filipinos and make them think that they're inferior to whites. So, yeah, I'm excited about this film.
Do you think that Filipino school children today should be taught differently about the Philippine-American War?
Sure. It's like watching Soldier Blue, that Western movie where, the Indians were always the bad guys. But, if you study your history, you get to see the real picture. So we're very happy that we invited the Secretary of Education to watch the film, and we were endorsed by the Department of Education
The
in the Philippines,
Secretary of
and in the Philippines, and there's a clamor for the universities to show Amigo in their schools and universities. So we're really hoping that Amigo will be a big part of the curriculum in our educational system. And likewise, when we showed this in New York, people were sending feelers for Amigo to be shown in their universities.
What's the use of talking about this, about the Philippine-American War today?
Well, it's very relevant today because of Afghanistan, Iraq. All the other places, the same situation. Vietnam, they're all, it's never good to occupy another country, and it makes me want to read more about this period. I think it's important to read and understand it. So that's what I'm planning to do.
The Philippine-American War ended a long time ago. What's the value of talking about it today?
Because it repeated itself.
What do you mean?
They're doing the same thing probably in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Vietnam.
How is that the same?
Well, the way they say they go there, they're fighting a just war, but then it's their country and they're interloping, they're forcing their way, and to do it, they try to put the rules that it's going to be for democracy, when actually they were not wanted there in the first place. They were interfering with their way of life. I think that if they are really honest with what they want to do for the good of the people that have been, taken over by some imperialist power, like with us, the Spaniards had us for more than 400 years, then after getting rid of the Spaniards, they should have given us the right to self-determination, because that's the very principle of the democracy. If these people want to rule themselves, whether they rule themselves like savages, so long as they are the ones who rule their country, that's the right.
And so there was a machination between the United States and Spain. So the Philippines was bought. It was not for liberation. It was for the United States to get a colony as part of its imperialistic program. So Mark Twain was very much against what happened there. But that's history, and why should the Americans know about this? The young people in America should know that America had this program of imperialism. And it was repeated in Vietnam, repeated in other countries.
And when you think about the history of the Philippines, it was colonized by Spain for 300 years, and the Americans were there from the turn of the century to 1946. It's very, compared to 300 years, it's short, but the lasting effects of American colonization is far greater than the 300 years that the Spaniards had brought. So, and again, in the movie, you would hear that they were referred to it as an insurrection, and whereas when you think about it, the Philippines was pretty much independent at that point, free from Spanish rule. So it's a matter of perspective who you ask. It's not an insurrection, it's basically a war. And it's never been treated that way. So I think that's something that needs to be explored. Yep.
What's something new that you got out of this movie that you didn't know before?
The waterboard treatment was done by the United States even then.
I actually think it's important now, present day, because a lot of Filipinos still have the American influence on them. They actually, because the Americans came in and took over, there's this huge influence on the way they think about themselves, which is internalized racism or colonial mentality. So it is important to know what happened, because they have, in the film, or actually after the film, someone mentioned that most Filipinos think that the Americans saved them. They think that they gave us civilization. Why we should learn about this war? To give a bigger sense of, to broaden the sense of self, Filipino self and identity, and knowing who you are and why are you acting the way you are. It's because of the American influence.
And the Philippine War was 100 years ago. What's the value of talking about it today?
Well, everything's affected by what happened in your past. How can you get people to be self-actualized if you have a lot of oppressors? Who are you really if there were a lot of people telling you this is who you are and so much influence from outside? So yeah, that's what I thought.
That's how my grandfather came here, and that's how my whole family came here originally, because of the Philippine-American War. You know, my grandfather worked on the troop ships, bringing back the American soldiers back and forth. You know, and so you know, he came to America in 1904. So the thing is that, you know, my family's been here 100 years. So you know, the thing about my understanding of our history is that, you know, if it wasn't for the war, you know, my family wouldn't be here. You know, so there was something, it was something negative, but there was something good that came out of it. You know, and that's how you know, my grandfather came here, and my grandmother, and then my mom was born here. I was born here. My kids were born here. So, you know, that's how our history, you know, became here in America. You know, and so that was something good that was from it. But yet, I know there a lot of the negative things because of that war. You know, so.
Yeah, I found out about it this morning. Actually, I'm mestizo myself. Oh, okay. And this movie is very pertinent to me because my grandfather was probably one of the soldiers, and my grandmother was Pinay. And so, you know, for my family, we have to kind of deal with how do we situate ourselves between, you know, our grandfathers who were colonizers, and my grandma, our lolas, who were indigenous people. So, in my family, that's always a discussion. You know, like all colonized people, you have this thing where you're mixed race, and so. And whether it's Latin America or the Philippines, in my family, I wouldn't be here if my Lolo and Lola never hooked up, and my grandfather's was American and my grandmother's were Pinay. And so my parents were born in the Philippines when we came here, and this was part of our legacy, being the first Amerindians. So this is an important movie for us. I found out about it this morning, and I called all my cousins, and people are showing up all over the Bay Area. In Stockton, I think there's a big thing in Stockton tomorrow with one of the people from the film, so yeah. Powerful movie. We've lived with this for like 40, 50 years of how do we situate ourselves amongst what people are we, you know? Who are we and how do we identify? So, cool.
Thank you very much.
Okay. No.
Some people might say, you know what, the Philippine War ended like 100 years ago. What's the value of like even talking about it today? Who cares?
Well, you gotta care. It's your roots. If you don't have a past, where's your future? If it wasn't for them, where are we today, right? Like, come on now. Yes, of course, it was a long time ago. But so was your life back then. Everything was a long time ago, but do you forget them? No, of course not. You're always going to remember them. Why? Because it's precious and it made who you are today. Same thing with the past, the history, you know.
One of the big problems is that when we've denied these events ever took place or excluded them from the history, we often lose the detail and the nature of who we are, what our identity is as a people, and what direction we need to go into.
To know one's history is to know oneself. If you understand the past, then you can understand the present better. So by watching this movie, by learning about my roots from my culture, it just shows like how proud of the people we are and how we could overcome a lot. Yeah, we might have lost the war, but in the end, we're still people who try to push forward. And really, for me, that's all I do in my life is to continue to move forward and improve and benefit myself and others.
Well, thanks a lot, man.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.